The thermometer nailed to the outer log wall of the cabin registered -52 degrees Celsius, though the biting wind howling through the Yenisei River basin made it feel much colder. Inside, the heavy cast-iron stove radiated a desperate, dry heat. William Bradley sat in a worn leather chair, staring at the embers. It was February 2026. He had not seen another human face since he vanished into the Siberian taiga in the autumn of 1956. William was 92 years old. 70 of those years had been spent in absolute, crushing isolation. Originally a young American engineer contracted for a post-war geological survey, he had been falsely accused of espionage during the height of Cold War paranoia. Facing a life sentence in a brutal labor camp, he had fled into the unforgiving wilderness. The taiga had swallowed him whole, hiding him from the world, but it had exacted a heavy toll. He had survived on trapped game, foraged roots, and a relentless, ironclad will. He had become a ghost. The wind shrieked, rattling the thick timber of the roof. Then, through the deafening roar of the storm, came a sound that did not belong to the wild. Thud, thud, scratch. William froze. His heart, usually a slow, steady metronome, hammered against his ribs. Bears were deep in hibernation. Wolves did not knock. Slowly, his arthritic fingers wrapped around the cold steel of his bolt-action Winchester rifle. He moved to the heavy oak door, unlatching the iron bar he had forged himself 5 decades ago. He pulled the door inward, bracing for the brutal assault of the winter gale. A body fell across the threshold, collapsing onto the rough-hewn floorboards in a heap of snow and brightly colored fabric. William quickly shoved the door shut against the storm, dropping the iron bar back into place. He knelt beside the intruder, his rifle still gripped tightly. It was a man, perhaps in his early 30s, clad in strange, synthetic layers William had never seen before. Neon orange Gore-Tex, carbon fiber snowshoes, and a heavy, insulated helmet. Ice clung to the man's eyelashes and beard. His lips were the color of bruised plums. He was dying. 70 years of defensive instinct warred with 70 years of profound loneliness. Humanity won. William dragged the man closer to the stove. He worked quickly, slicing away the strange, modern fabrics with his hunting knife. Beneath the layers, he found bizarre artifacts. A sleek, black rectangle of glass, a Garmin GPS beacon, and a lightweight satellite phone. William stared at the items, completely alien to his 1950s understanding of technology, before tossing them aside to focus on the man's survival. He wrapped the stranger in heavy wolf pelts, elevated his feet, and began forcing spoonfuls of warm, salted bone broth between his chattering teeth. For 2 days, the storm raged outside, and a fever raged inside the stranger. William tended to him meticulously, applying bear fat to the frost-bitten extremities and keeping the fire roaring. On the evening of the 3rd day, the stranger's eyes fluttered open. He stared at the ceiling, then at the fire, and finally at the deeply lined, bearded face of the old man sitting across from him. Where am I?" the man rasped in perfect, unaccented American English. William flinched. The sound of his native tongue, spoken by someone other than himself, felt like a physical blow. He swallowed hard, his vocal cords rusty and unpracticed. "You are safe," William replied, his voice a gravelly whisper. "You are in the taiga." The young man struggled to prop himself up. "I'm Charles Dawson. My snowmobile threw a track on the ice. I walked for 2 days." The whiteout. Charles looked around the cabin, his eyes widening at the cured meats hanging from the rafters, the oil lanterns, and the complete absence of anything manufactured past the mid-20th century. "Who are you? How long have you been out here?" William hesitated. "My name is William. I built this place. I have been here since 1956. Charles stared at him, the color draining from his face, replaced by utter disbelief. 1956? You've been here for 70 years? Alone? William nodded slowly. The weight of his exile pressed down on him. And suddenly, the question that had haunted his every waking hour for 7 decades bubbled to the surface. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Tell me, Charles, The Soviets. Are they still searching the forests? Is Khrushchev still in power? Did Eisenhower ever strike back? A profound silence filled the small cabin, broken only by the crackle of the wood stove. Charles looked at the old man with a mixture of awe and profound sorrow. "William," Charles said softly, his voice trembling, "Eisenhower has been dead for over 50 years. The Cold War is over. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. The Soviet Union dissolved 35 years ago. You don't have to hide anymore. There is no one looking for you." William sat back, the breath leaving his lungs in a ragged gasp. 70 years. He had eaten tree bark to stave off scurvy. He had fought off starving predators with a handmade spear. He had watched his youth, his prime, and his old age evaporate into the freezing Siberian winds, all to hide from a ghost. The enemy he had feared for a lifetime had ceased to exist decades ago. A tear, the first in half a century, escaped his eye and disappeared into his thick white beard. I could have gone home," William whispered, the tragedy of his lost life crashing over him. Charles nodded sympathetically. "You can still go home. I have a satellite beacon. Once the storm clears, I can call for an extraction helicopter. We can both get out of here." For a few hours, a fragile camaraderie blossomed in the cabin. William shared stories of the wild, and Charles explained the modern world, the internet. Men, walking on the moon, the turning of the millennium. But as the evening wore on, the atmosphere began to subtly shift. Charles, having regained some of his strength, began to ask pointed, specific questions. How far was the nearest road? Did William have a map of the local terrain? Had anyone ever stumbled upon this cabin before? William, despite his isolation, had not lost his perception. He noticed Charles's eyes darting toward William's survival cache in the corner, specifically a heavy, iron-bound box where William stored the gold nuggets he had panned from the river over the decades to trade in case he ever encountered a sympathetic local trapper. "What were you doing out here, Charles?" William asked quietly, stirring the coals. "A snowmobile in the deep taiga during a February whiteout. That is not a trip for a tourist." Charles's friendly demeanor hardened. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, desperate calculation. "I told you, I'm an adventurer." "Your hands are smooth," William noted, his gaze fixed on the fire. "No calluses from gripping handlebars, no windburn from an open trail, and your left shoulder. You favored it when I dragged you in. Not frostbite, a graze from a bullet." Charles froze. Slowly, his hand slid toward the pocket of his dried trousers, retrieving a sleek, modern ceramic knife he had managed to keep hidden during his recovery. The twist was bitter and sharp. Charles was no adventurer. He was a fugitive, an American smuggler who had botched a diamond exchange in the Northern Territories, resulting in a bloodbath. He had stolen a snowmobile and driven blindly into the storm to escape the local authorities, fully expecting to die in the ice until he stumbled upon William's cabin. Now, Charles saw a way out, an untraceable cabin, a hoard of raw gold, and an old man who legally didn't exist. It was the perfect place to lay low until the spring thaw. "You're very observant for a ghost, William," Charles sneered, dropping the friendly facade. He gripped the knife tightly, slowly standing up. "I really am sorry. You saved my life. But I can't have you slowing me down, and I can't leave witnesses. If you really are a ghost, it's time to act like one." William did not panic. He did not beg. He had spent 70 years observing the apex predators of the Siberian wild, and he knew that survival was rarely about strength. It was about knowing your terrain. 70 years, Charles," William said softly, not rising from his chair. "Do you know what that does to a man? It burns away everything unnecessary. It leaves only the instinct to endure." Charles lunged forward, raising the ceramic blade. In a fraction of a second, William's foot kicked the heavy iron lever at the base of the cast-iron stove. The safety grate snapped open, and with a swift sweep of his fire poker, William hurled a massive, blinding cloud of glowing orange embers and scalding wood ash directly into Charles's face. Charles screamed in agony. dropping the knife as the burning ash seared his eyes and skin. Blinded and thrashing, he stumbled backward. William moved with a fluid, practiced grace that belied his age. He snatched the heavy oak walking stick resting beside his chair and swung it in a vicious arc, striking Charles hard against the side of his knee. The bone snapped with a sickening crunch. Charles collapsed to the floor, howling in pain, grasping his ruined leg. William calmly stepped over the writhing man. He picked up the ceramic knife, inspected its alien material with mild curiosity, and set it on the table. He then walked over to the corner, picked up Charles's heavy synthetic zip ties from his discarded survival gear, and expertly bound the young man's wrists and ankles. The storm outside finally began to break. The howling wind reduced to a low, mournful moan. William sat back down in his leather chair, watching the defeated fugitive sob on the floor. The irony of the night was not lost on the old man. For 70 years, he had hidden from the monsters of the modern world, only to have the modern world deliver a monster right to his doorstep. But the wild had protected him. He belonged to the taiga now, and the taiga did not suffer fools. Slowly, William reached over to the table and picked up the strange, modern Garmin GPS beacon. He examined the brightly colored buttons, finding the one marked SOS. He pressed it, a small green light blinking to life in the dim cabin. "The authorities will come for you, Charles," William said, his voice echoing with the quiet authority of the frozen forest. "They will take you back to the world you ruined." "What about you?" Charles spat through his teeth, shivering in pain. "They'll find you too. Your secret is out." William stood up, pulling his heavy wolf fur coat over his shoulders and slinging his Winchester rifle across his back. He looked around the cabin one last time, the sanctuary that had been both his salvation and his prison. He had survived the Cold War. He had survived the wild. And now, he had survived the future. "Let them find the cabin," William said softly, stepping toward the door as the first light of dawn broke over the icy horizon. "I have 70 years of forest to disappear into, and, this time, I am not hiding from anyone." William opened the door, stepping out into the blinding white silence of Siberia, and vanished into the wild.